morning and welcome to Eyewitness News. It's day 3 of Jacob Zuma's testimony here at the State Capture Commission. Yesterday, another explosive, dramatic day inside the State Capture Commission. A lot of revelations from the former president, speaking about how there are now fresh death threats on his life, his family, his legal counsel, and even his close associates. So we are on day 3 of his testimony. He will be continuing. He still has 2 more days, Thursday and Friday, but we understand that that could be cut short if, of course, he finishes testifying on the things that the commission will be putting before him today. So joining me is EWN senior reporter Theto Mahlakwana. Theto, thanks for your time. We were together inside the commission yesterday and we started with the former president speaking about, these fresh death threats. He's going to be taking the stand again this morning. Do you suspect we'll hear some other revelation because it's becoming a trend?
I mean, him opening the scene with dramatic effects is pretty much the norm now. But I do not foresee that he will be, of course, adding any more to that, because I feel that we've pretty much moved beyond the point where he can make those bold and grand statements prior to going into the depth of the proceedings. Oh, and he has just arrived on cue, pretty much.
Yes, he's just arrived. In fact, we're looking at the visuals of the former president just downstairs. His motorcade is making it into the State Capture Building Commission, where the building is located, and he's going to continue, Theto. Yesterday he touched on Themba Maseko, the allegations that he put before the commission in terms of whether or not he made that call to Themba Maseko, but also the behavior of one of the Gupta brothers who was harassing Themba Maseko and saying, you need to give us this government, you need to work with us or else you're going to regret because you may lose your job. And his response being, look, I can't answer for how the Gupta brothers behaved.
Absolutely. That was Ajay Gupta, who was persistently phoning Themba Maseko at the time GCIS head to kind of coerce him into allocating the advertising spend of government that amounts to 600 million rand to the Gupta media companies. Now, the former president, of course, saying that he cannot comment on a conversation that he was not party to, saying that he cannot really give the information any clarity relating to the motivation that was behind Ajay Gupta making those demands from Maseko, which of course is within his right to do so because he wasn't privy to that conversation. It wasn't a 3-year conversation. But from what we understand and from what Themba Maseko told the commission, Themba was put under the impression that this is information that is coming from the very top of government leadership, and even the threat that should you not abide by this demand, your superiors will be told about it, suggested that obviously they had a hand that was much more politically heavier than his. And of course we must also rephrase again the fact that he was asked about Themba Maseko's exiting from the GCIS, emphasizing that of course he knows nothing about it because in discussions with ministers about the tenure of DGs, there are those who may want them shifted for reasons that he doesn't know about, saying that in fact his name could have just been thrown in there by the former DPSA minister, the late Collins Chabane, just for the sake of pretty much finding a scapegoat for explaining to Maseko why it is that he wanted him removed.
And I guess the sad thing is that Collins Chabane is not here to answer for himself, right? Because the suggestion that the former president is making is that there was a breakdown in relationship possibly between Themba Maseko and Collins Chabane. But interestingly, Themba Maseko tweeted last night saying, just yesterday during that testimony of the former president, saying, Collins Chabane was one of my favorite bosses. We were cool,
playing golf together.
Playing golf so there was that subliminal message there to say, actually, we were okay. There was never a breakdown of relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the kind of outside influences that we've experienced since the former president took to the stand here, where, of course, people who he's been implicated by and those who he implicates have been, adding on to the public discourse about what exactly it is, what they think of it. And I wonder if, the convenience, it's not just too convenient to, for example, say that Maseko could have just simply been misled by Chabane because he really is not here to speak for himself. But I think an important point that we've been carrying out throughout this testimony by him is the fact that a lot of these facts will have to be checked by the commission. They will have to go back and check where there are minutes, for example, to cabinet meetings, because he says that eventually the decision to dismiss Maseko from the GCIS was made by the cabinet. So if it was indeed out of a cabinet meeting, there would need to be some sort of a record of exactly what the motivation was from Chabane's side for the removal of Maseko, which is not cosmetic. Of course, it would have to be very substantive and weigh heavily on that decision, because a DG is a critical position in a department.
Certainly. I want us to move now to the legal wrangling that we saw yesterday, because the legal team was very clear in that we will protect our client, and that's what they've been doing. They would get up unannounced and get there and say, he doesn't have to answer that question. Your line of questioning is very problematic because you're almost treating him like an accused. What are we expecting today? And in terms of that legal wrangling, are we expecting Zuma's legal team to also come out and try protect him and try and accuse the evidence leader, Advocate Paul Pretorius, of treating the former president as an accused?
It's going to be very interesting, Clement, because there's also the testimony of Barbara Hogan that's going to be put to him, which was based on a lot of actual events that took place, she said at the time, inside government offices and inside government chambers, where of course we did not understand the machinations at the time of just how a lot of these lapses happened in the public service, to have seen the kind of corruption that we saw, the kind of questionable leaders in SOEs that we saw. So I expect that we're going to see a lot more interjections from the legal team, because it's going to be very technical, especially because whatever he says can be checked against actual records. Because if indeed he did call former Minister Hogan to a meeting to say to him, install a Siyabonga Gama at Transnet, who was at the time facing some sort of disciplinary questions around him and around his conduct, there would need to be some record of that. And from what she testified and what she told us, I imagine that she had kept some sort of a record of that the commission can go back to, meaning that should the former president in any way put himself on the line, his legal defense will be ready to step up and actually disturb proceedings just to clarify those questions.
And that's a critical one, isn't it? Because the State Capture Commission has that investigative capacity. We know they've gone out to get telephonic records to prove a particular point. Bruce Colon was here and they said, we're listening to you saying, mentioning and mentioning the name of former President Jacob Zuma, so they can still do that, right? But I want us to move now and move to the politics of the State Capture Commission, especially where it centers the former president. We're seeing different political figures arriving here in support, clearly, of the former president. Yesterday was Ace Magashule's first day. Malusi Gigaba was also here. What does this tell us, though, about what's happening politically within the ANC? Because it's almost like there's this regrouping of the wounded, if you will, from Nasrec.
Were they ever dispersed?
Yeah.
That would be the question.
That's the question.
Yeah, because there's never been some sort of a fluid agreement that actually we are no longer going to align ourselves with the kind of factions that we've ever taken. We've seen some senior ANC leaders and members supporting the former president post Nasrec, post the 2017 conference that installed from the current president Cyril Ramaphosa as the leader of the ANC. Now, the presence of someone like Malusi Gigaba, who was appointed minister by Zuma for the first time, the presence of a Faith Mutambi, who only tasted cabinet when Zuma appointed her, those just prove that there's a deep sense of loyalty towards the man, and there's a sense of they're tied, to the very end, it would appear. And the kind of machinations that are happening here, of course, do have implications on how deep the divisions in the party can go, because everyone is taking sides. The allegations that there are spies within the ANC, like you in your interview with the SG yesterday, Ace Magashule, where he says that there would need to be a meeting where we discuss these issues, even possibly a commission, within the party to investigate these issues, which brings to the question, who exactly is going to take whose side? We've seen how it's playing out and how it's even if we take it outside of this commission, how ANC factions are influencing the public protection sector versus the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan court case, for example, and legal battles. So it's the ever-presence of the division, I think, that we are starting to see now.
Yeah, so the division's becoming very clear there. What are we expecting today? Yesterday we closed off the commission while we were just introducing and getting the president to respond to that. There's still testimony that they need to ask him about, because he had claimed that the former president put pressure on him to sign off on the nuclear build project, and when he refused, he was fired. So what can we expect today?
So there's the testimony of the former Public Enterprises Minister, Barbara Hogan, and we do remember that at the time of her departure, that is when a lot of the nefarious actions or acts in the public service were being exposed. This was right in the crux of it that saw, of course, Malusi Gigaba being appointed the minister of that portfolio then. Now, the former president is going to have to take questions related to the testimony that she placed here, that he, of course, insisted on the appointment of Siyabonga Gama, who we now know was supposedly party to the Gransdale corruption that is crumbled Transnet. I mean, it's still indebted to this day. It was a functional organization in the state that was relied upon to be the center and the nerve center of the country's transport, rail, and all manner of transport systems, and now it's ailing. And there's also the fact that he insisted apparently on even, on the minister holding off on board appointments, because he said even that would change in the future. And Barbara Hogan told the commission that she was shocked. She was constantly shocked by all these processes, because she understood government procedure to work in a particular way. And a lot of the time that Zuma was at the helm, all of that was out of the window. And there was pretty much just this freestyling of the governance of the state, which she testified to, and which Zuma will have to take the questions on when he comes back to the stand today.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the irony of Malusi Gigaba arriving here yesterday, while we start with the testimony around Barbara Hogan, because he took over as Public Enterprises Minister after Barbara Hogan, and we know what happened after that. But that's EWN senior reporter Teto Mahlakwana. It's day 3 of Jacob Zuma's testimony here at the State Capture Commission. There's still more questions that he has to answer to, and that commission starting at exactly 10 o'clock, and we will be live here on EWN. Thank you so much for watching.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. My name is Mr. Prestorius. How are you? Are you okay?
Check, yeah. One, two, yeah. Check, one.
Check 1, 2, 3.
Sharp.
Yeah, this test on the comms. I'm talking on channel 2, camera 2. I'm talking on camera 2. Please check on the camera 2.
One, two, Hendrik, can you hear me? Testing my camera 2. Testing camera 2. Hello, Hendrik, the city. Hendrik, camera 2, testing mic. 1, 2. On camera 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Good morning, Mr. Pretorius. Good morning, Mr. Zuma. Good morning, everybody. Are you ready, Mr. Pretorius?
Morning, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Zuma, I'd like to go back, please, just to two brief matters dealing with evidence yesterday. In relation to Mr. Maseko, as the CEO of GCIS. I understand from your evidence, and I understand it to be correct, that that post is the equivalent of a head of a department post,
Yes.
and that certain provisions of the relevant legislation would apply. I don't intend to debate those provisions with you, but I need, in fairness to you, to ask certain questions about the process leading up to the termination of Mr. Maseko's employment as head of GCIS and the transfer to the Department of Public Service and Administration. So I understand your evidence. You made no decision.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. I think Mr. Skakane indicates he wishes to say something. Let's allow him.
Chair, as I said, I'm sorry to break what I promised.
Yes.
I do think this is problematic. We get a list of names of people that are going to be, well, whose evidence is going to be dealt with, right?
Yes.
And my client has to deal with Mr. Masego, and it moves to Barbara Hogan. And when we're dealing with Barbara Hogan, my learned friend goes back to, I think it's a problem.
Why is it a
of
problem?
making- Because I think we need to have a structure about what we're doing. It's quite difficult because we think we're done with the name and it's back. I think it's a procedural
Well,
issue.
I would agree that preferably when we are done with questioning the witness or Mr. Zuma about the evidence of a particular witness, then we are done.
Yes.
But I don't think there would be anything fundamentally wrong if one realizes after that witness has been, the evidence of that witness has been done, that maybe there were some questions that were overlooked that are important, provided Mr. Zuma is able to deal with them. The timing, if need be, one can look at that. I certainly also may have something in regard to Mr. Masego that I might wish to say. But it's important that preferably it should be structured in a way, as you say, that when we're done with the evidence of one witness, that should be so. But we all know sometimes that later on one might think something and then say, there may be unfairness if we don't deal with this. So my prima facie view is that as long as Mr. Zuma is able to deal with it, I mean, from my point of view, even if it was to be said, well, maybe it's not the best time to deal with it when we have started with Ms. Hogan and haven't finished with her, maybe we must finish with her, and then before we go to the next witness,
Yes.
then that for me is fine as well.
We may have made a mistake, Chair, because we saw a list. We were
Yes.
quite keen to move to
Yes.
Minister Godan quite quickly, but
Yes.
and the name was shifted.
Yes.
But it's fine. I think the chair is
Yes,
making a
but I must also say, I was going to raise with Mr., part of what you say, I was also going to raise with Mr. Pretorius. On my bundle,
Yes.
after we had dealt with Mr. Masego's evidence and Ms. Mento's evidence, my bundle suggested the next witness was to be Mr. Nene.
Yes.
That's in terms of mine. I'm assuming that his is the same and yours is the same. So I was wondering why he moved to Ms. Hogan before going to dealing with Mr. Nene's one. But I'll hear what he says. But the principle of an issue, a question being raised after we think we are done with one witness, I think there's no problem with it. But it may be that there may be nothing wrong to say, let's finish with the one we have already started, but maybe before we go to the next one, then let's cover whatever may have been forgotten.
As a structure,
Yes.
there's nothing wrong. I'll take what the chair says.
Yes, yes, okay, thank you very much.
May I just say, Chair,
Yes.
in answer to that, very often when one considers overnight the evidence given, the questions asked, and the answers given, one understands that it may be appropriate to put certain issues to the witness concerned, in this case the former president, not only in order to ensure that the questioning has been full and proper and in accordance with the mandate of investigation that the Commission holds, but also in order to be fair to the witness. Because from the evidence, certain conclusions may be drawn, particularly in relation to the evidence of the former president in relation to the transfer of Mr. Maseko, which requires, in fairness, confirmation of certain facts or certain facts to be put to him so that when later it is sought to draw conclusions from that evidence, the witnesses had an opportunity to comment on those possible conclusions. So there can be no unfairness. It happens regularly in proceedings, particularly of this nature where there are a vast amount of issues to examine. And I also have a question in relation to Ms. Mentor. I'm not sure that it's not appropriate now at the beginning of the day to deal with it, but if you say I must wait until Ms. Hogan is
Look,
matters are finished, I'm happy to do that. It's not a
I
problem.
wouldn't want to fix a hard and fast rule, but even for the transcript, it may be that it's convenient if once we have started with the evidence or questions relating to the evidence of a particular witness, we finish the questions relating to that witness. And then before we go into the next one, if there's anything to catch up with regard to previous witnesses, we do that. I don't, as I say, I don't fix it as a hard and fast rule, but I don't think it would prejudice you either.
It certainly won't, Chair, but what I do find particularly disturbing is the manner in which control is sought to be exercised over the way the legal team has planned and is asking its questions.
Well, let me say this. I had thought of saying this before, but I'm going to say it now. The legal team of the Commission is there to do a certain job. The legal team for the former president is there to do a certain job. I am there to do a certain job. All of us have our own jobs to do. The legal team for the former president has no power to prescribe to the Commission's legal team how to do their job, nor has the legal team of the Commission nor has the legal team of the Commission power to prescribe to the former president's legal team how to do their job. They may have views about each other's way of doing their respective jobs, but in the end, each side needs to do what it has to do, one, with a view to allowing the proceedings to proceed as smoothly as possible, however, without compromising their own position. So those are the two things that I think would guide all sides. Whatever I also do in terms of questions I allow, rulings I might make, they are aimed at, one, ensuring as smooth a flow of proceedings as possible, fairness to all concerned, but without any compromise on my part on the job that I have to do. So when either the former president's legal team makes any submissions to me, which they are entitled to make as to any objection to certain questions or any objection to anything, I will look at it in the way that I, as chairperson, should look at it. If they are right, I will uphold them. If they are wrong, I will reject their submissions. I will do the same with the legal team of the commission. And if questions are asked to the former president that I feel are unfair, I will intervene. If questions are asked that his team or even he feels may be unfair, if I feel there's nothing unfair with them, I will allow them. So, to the extent that the Commission's legal team may feel that the counsel for Mr. Zuma is trying to control anything, the legal team of the Commission must resist that. The Commission's legal team must do its job and resist anything that may not be appropriate. Mr. Zuma's legal team, they will also be trying to do their job in terms of protecting their client if they think there is anything unfair, but if the legal team of the Commission believes there is nothing unfair, they have to make that clear. And where I need to make a ruling, I will. Whereas yesterday, I think a discussion might produce a result that allows us to proceed, I will do that. So I just want to say, and I think in regard to that, I want to point out that it's important to draw attention to, in terms of the role of the legal team, to draw attention to Rule 3.2 of the Rules of the Commission. And I draw this just so that there is no confusion. A member of the Commission's legal team may put questions to a witness whose evidence is presented to the Commission by the Commission's legal team, including questions aimed at assisting the Commission in assessing the truthfulness of the evidence of a witness. Subject to the directions of the chairperson, the Commission's legal team may ask leading questions. I don't understand, it's not my understanding that anything that Mr. Zuma's legal team has said either in the past 2 days or today, I don't understand that anything they have said is something that suggests that Mr. Zuma should not be asked questions aimed at establishing the truthfulness of any of the issues. And the Commission's legal team is free to do its job the way they believe they should carry it out. And if in doing so, Mr. Zuma's legal team feels there is a problem, they'll raise it. And if necessary, I'll make a ruling. So I think that on the issue that was raised by Mr. Skakana a few minutes ago, my understanding is that he understands the attitude taken by the chairperson, and he mentioned something that was of concern. I think once I'd explained my attitude, he was not rigid about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Zuma, yesterday when we adjourned, we were dealing with the evidence of Ms. Hogan, and she had testified, as was pointed out to you, in regard to how chief executive officers and board members of state-owned entities were appointed in the normal course, and she described a process with which I understood you largely agreed, and that appears at page 403 of the bundle GGB, exhibit GGB.
Have you got the right one, Mr. Zuma? The right file?
I hope so. That is
on the spine, it should be written GGB on the spine. If it's written GGB, it will be the right one.
Yeah, GGB.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have page 403, Mr. Zuma?
403, the red ink.
Red number, yes.
Yes.
Having set out in her evidence the normal processes or processes that she recorded as normal, she says in paragraph 22 something different. She says that in practice, however, and I'm referring to paragraph 22, there were parallel behind-the-scenes processes. As the ruling party, the ANC had expectations that they would have influence over who was appointed to boards via the deployment committee of the ANC. When that ANC came into power in 1994, the deployment committee played a useful role in identifying appropriate candidates from among the ranks of progressive forces to fill crucial positions, as the state at that time was staffed entirely by the previous apartheid government appointees. A matter that has concerned the Commission's investigation is how senior people in the boards and executive posts of state-owned entities are appointed, whether those appointments are appropriate or have resulted in the appropriate fulfillment of tasks, and whether that has influenced in any way what has happened in the state-owned entities over an extended period. And one of the issues raised by Ms. Hogan was the issue of deployment. Does the practice, and perhaps you can help us with your knowledge and experience to understand the deployment process, if it exists, understand why it exists, and understand how it is exercised and what influence it plays in appointments at state-owned entities at board level and senior executive level. Could you tell us a little, please, about deployment? If it exists, firstly, and secondly, if it does exist, how it is employed or utilized as a manner of influencing selection of board members in SOEs and senior executives in SOEs.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is a deployment committee in the ANC. The ANC took a decision that given the fact that it was a ruling party, it is given that position because it has won elections. In other words, people in the country feel that the ANC can lead them better on the basis of its policies. Now, the ANC has an interest once it has put its government, because the government would have come as a result of the ANC having been accepted by the voters, that the programs and policies that it is putting across would indeed be implemented. And therefore, it took a decision that there must be some assistance to government in terms of finding people to do specific things. And also, ministers, as they search for people to put into positions, they would also rely to the party to say, I want to deploy so and so, or a person in this kind of position. Is there any person capable for this that you could recommend, etc.? In other words, the interest of the ANC is to ensure that there are cadres who will implement the programs appropriately. So they interact with the deployment committee in the process, as you would be looking for somebody. Where you headhunt at times. At times they don't have to come to the committee if they've got individuals they believe they can do the job. But once that is done, then the processes of the government will kick in. And at times, the minister might say, look, I think I've got a better candidate. I don't think this one will fit. The deployment committee assisted that process because its aim is that things should be done. It does not impose them, whether you like it or not. It is a discussion that takes place. And then once that process has been done, there will have to be a government process as well, wherein people go through interviews, where the minister appoints or put together a number of colleagues to help in the process of interviews. A person perhaps that the deployment committee felt this could be the right person to this position might actually fail the interviews. So it's not that once you have taken that decision, then it's a foregone conclusion, because you might find that the person does not have the necessary things that are needed for a particular job. It is all done to help that when you make or you put people, you don't just get restricted to one person. There's a variety of people that you look at. And that's what happens. And then the ministers will go to the deployment committee to say, I am looking for a person, or the deployment committee could say, Minister, we have people that you could look at. So it's a process that feeds into the process of the government, the one that comes from the political, what you call a deployment committee. In other words, it helps the government, firstly, to make the candidates available, and also to look at specific people. At times, the committee has nothing to do because there may be no need at all. And the minister could be knowing what they are doing, find somebody, and bring that somebody here. It does not mean that each and every person who gets appointed goes through this process. That's generally how it works.
As I understand it, there are three issues that you've emphasized, and I'd like to understand them to see if I have it correct. The first is that the deployment committee of the ruling party is involved in decision-making from time to time in the appointment of board members of state-owned entities and senior executives. Do I understand that correctly?
The deployment committee does not necessarily appoint. It recommends.
It is involved, I was getting to that
Or in the
point.
process.
It is involved in the process of appointment, either in hearing from ministers who their candidates might be and giving input on that, or suggesting candidates to the minister in that process.
Yes.
But I understand you to also say that the deployment committee is not decisive in that process, but that the final decision would rest, as I understand you, with the minister following the selection procedures, interviews, and the like. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Does that mean that the deployment committee would have a list of people with indications of what their qualifications are, what their experiences are, in what sectors, and so on, so that whenever they are consulted by a minister in regard to a particular post, they could go to that list and see who do we have in our list who have qualifications that are relevant for this post and experience, and then they could say, here are some of the people you could look at, or is there no list? They simply work on the basis of people that they know.
They don't necessarily keep a list for that. I think it happens that the ANC knows, the party knows these people, and it knows some of them, their capacities, some may not know. So when that situation arises, they will then look at those. It might be some other lists, etc. Once they know what type of person is wanted to assist the process. Not that every time it happens, they must go to the deployment committee to look at the list. No, not at all. At times it does not happen at all. But when it happens, that is the recommendation the deployment committee will make to assist those in government.
Thank you.
Who would ordinarily sit on the deployment committee, Mr. Zuma?
Sorry?
Who would ordinarily sit on the deployment committee? Is it appointees of the party? Is it people who fulfill particular posts? Can you assist us there?
Yes. There are people who are appointed. Ever since it has existed, normally it is the person who has been chairing, they would be the deputy president. Why the deputy president? Because the deputy president is a deputy president of both the party and government. He would also understand what is needed in government. So you don't have a person who's chairing this committee who knows nothing about what's happening in government, because he would not be able to assist to get the kind of people that are really needed in government. And that's why he sits there to chair. Some of the members of the deployment committee would be ministers of a particular type, also who will be knowledgeable about what happens in government. So the members are not just members handpicked because they are there, are people who will help this process.
And are they elected or appointed?
Appointed by the structures, senior structures of the movement.
Would it be the NEC that would appoint?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Would the sitting president sit on the deployment committee?
No, doesn't sit, but can, if he has ideas about things, can also interact with the chair, whatever. But does not sit. It is the deputy president who chairs, the highest kind of officer who would be in that committee. The president, no.
Do they have, that is the deployment committee, do they have a term like whenever there's a new NEC, that new NEC appoints a deployment committee for the duration of the life of the NEC, or they were appointed at a certain stage and they continue irrespective of the change of the NEC, or what is the position?
Yeah, it goes with the term.
With the term of
With
the
the
NEC?
term, yes.
Yes, okay.
You might find new members if there is a new term, but you don't have to be appointing in the process of the 5 years.
Yes, okay,
So that's how it goes. It goes together with the term.
okay.
Yeah.
One more general point by way of introduction, Mr. Zuma. Does the deployment committee involve itself with the appointment of boards of SOEs or board members of SOEs, senior executives in SOEs, as well as appointments in government departments?
At times, because they might recommend, if they know some people who have experience in the boards, they might recommend if that kind of activity comes.
As well as government departments?
Government departments in what sense?
Well, an appointment to a head of a government department, for example, would that be something that might fall
That
within
could also go
jurisdiction
through.
or ambit of the activities
Yeah,
of the deployment committee?
particularly at the leadership level of the departments.
At paragraph 23, on page 404, Ms. Hogan expressed some views, quite firm views, in fact, on the usefulness of the deployment committee and the effectiveness, in effect, of its process. She says in paragraph 23, however, the usefulness of such a deployment committee these days is debatable. And she asks the question, how can just a handful of people possibly have the institutional knowledge and resources to pronounce on suitable candidates for every senior position in government and the private sector? Let's leave aside the word every there, and may I ask you to comment on that, that observation of hers. She's saying, in effect, as I understand it, that people in the committee would not have the institutional knowledge and resources to pronounce on suitable candidates for senior positions in government and the private sector.
Well, I don't know. This would be her own views as an individual, but the organization has taken a decision to have this kind of structures. Because here she's just expressing her own views.
No, I understand.
Which is not accurate. The views that is not accurate because, as I said, setting up that committee There are ministers who serve there, who have the institutional memory, who serve there, chaired by the deputy president who sits in the cabinet and every cabinet committees. So it's not a correct argument that she's putting. She's just expressing a view.
I just want to take a step back and explain why these questions are being asked, because it is a matter of concern or a matter that is part of the issue that this commission is investigating, and that is how senior appointments and SOEs take place. But let's move on. She says that in paragraph 23, in the second sentence, it cannot be that closeness to or membership of the ANC or any of its alliance structures or to factions within these structures should be the determining factors in the selection of candidates for senior positions. Do you have a comment on that?
No, I think she's still pursuing her argument, really, how she's looking at this.
Yes, I understand that.
That's how. It's her view. But the manner in which we handle this is the manner in which I've just explained.
Well, what I think she is saying in substance is that the deployment committee would inevitably favor for appointment to important positions in SOEs persons who are close to or members of the ruling party and close to or members of alliance structures, that there's a bias in their favor in the activities of the deployment committee in the process. I think that's what she's saying.
Well, I don't know what she thinks should happen. Why the people who must be appointed should not come from the people that either the people know and they know their experiences, and in the process of that, the people who are here are people that would be known either because of the profession or also that are who might be opposed to the policies that made the party to be elected to government.
Do I understand from what you're saying that the deployment committee would consider as an important attribute for appointment to senior executive positions and boards the ability or willingness of a candidate to implement policies of the ruling party? Is that correct?
Yes, I say so. That's part of the elements.
Well, I don't know whether Mr. Pretorius might have been accurate in suggesting to you that what Ms. Hogan says in paragraph 23 in the second sentence, that she is suggesting that there might be bias in favor of people put up by the deployment committee. But I do see that in that sentence she says, and this is a sentence that Mr. Pretorius did read, it cannot be that closeness to or membership of the ANC or any of its alliance structures, in brackets, or to factions within these structures, should be the determining factors in the selection of candidates for senior positions. My impression is that she seems to suggest that membership of the ANC or of the alliance partners is the determining factor that either the deployment committee looks at or those in government who are given names by the deployment committee take into account. That's my understanding of it. I don't know whether, now that I've read it to you, you also have the same understanding of what she is saying. But if I'm correct, it's important to put your understanding of what the true position is.
That's why I was saying she's of course putting her own views on the matters. In other countries, for an example, when one party wins elections, and let us say, to clarify the issue, it has been the opposition wins the elections. When they come to the office, they don't take people out there, they remove everybody out and put their people. It's a general practice in the world. We are not even doing that. It's a question of how the party looks at not only to the members, even those who are not members at all. That's what we do. In other countries, it's extreme. They come in even with a sweeper and everybody else of the new party, because they must implement the party policies that was accepted by the people. You can't take people, because the opposition would not do so. So that's why I'm saying it's just raising more her views about this.
Chair, as I understand the purpose of certainly this tranche of questions and answers, Mr. Zuma is in a unique position, given his history and association with leadership in this country over the past many years, to assist us in this. And I would not want to confine the questions and answers to the precise wording. It's an issue that is raised, and we might narrow the questions and answers too closely if we simply deal with the precise wording and opinion of Ms. Hogan.
No.
We are interested in this investigation, in how the former president can assist us in understanding the issue of deployment.
Well, counsel for Mr. Zuma will indicate if they have a problem, but my inclination is that since the issue of the deployment committee is being raised here, if you have questions relating to the deployment committee on which you think Mr. Zuma can assist in enlightening the commission, you should be able to put those. He has indicated that the deployment committee is chaired by the deputy president. He was deputy president at a certain stage, and I'm sure he therefore chaired the deployment committee. So he should be quite well informed, at least how it's been functioning, and I'm sure he will assist us as far as he's able to.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just then attempt to understand your evidence in relation to the activities of the deployment committee in appointments that we've discussed. Your emphasis is not so much, as I understand it, on closeness to or membership of the ANC. Your emphasis is on an ability and willingness to implement the policies of the ruling party in those posts.
Yes, general.
Correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, general.
Thank you.
That's what it is.
She says in the last sentence of paragraph 23, Mr. Zuma, directorships on boards should never be granted to the favored few as a reward for loyalty to a party or a faction of a party, or as a retirement benefit for the well-connected. Her evidence there, it seems, is to say that such appointments as may be directed or suggested by the deployment committee should never be granted as a reward simply for loyalty to a party or faction of a party. Do you have a view on that?
I think once again, she's expressing her views. She's expressing her views because, as I was explaining, the party can't just allow a situation where you take anybody anywhere that we have no knowledge of. Now, those people, including her, they are where they are because of their loyalty to the party, to the organization. They believe in the policies of the organization. Now, who will say deliberately, let us forget about those people and just find some other people? I don't understand the logic. I'm explaining this because it may be her own view because of certain cases she may be aware of, if such a thing happened. It's not meant to take your friends. This one, if you are a member of this, you don't take your friends. You look at, because the committee discuss, it would discuss what type of a person we want. It's not going to be which friend we take. I think the point she's making, she's putting a point, her own point, because she might be having an experience of that nature. But in terms of the process, it's not done in the manner in which she's putting it.
Maybe I can just say, Mr. Zuma, that sometimes a witness will be expressing his or her view, but it may be important if you know, you have knowledge in relation to that issue to indicate whether that view is correct or is justified or not, but you may elect that you don't want to enter into that. But I'm just saying that because the way this is put here suggests that the deployment committee might not be doing what you have testified it is doing. You have said that the deployment committee looks at people within the organizations who have certain skills, so that when there are positions in government that need to be filled, they are able to say to ministers, here are some names. We are not saying you must take them. We say they must go through the normal appointment processes, and ultimately the government functionaries make the decisions. That's my understanding of what your evidence says. Yes. But this sentence suggests that her understanding is that people who might not be deserving to be appointed to certain positions are suggested or put forward by the deployment committee for the reasons that she gives, and she says it's a favored few, as a reward for loyalty to a party or a fraction of a party, or as a retirement benefit for the well-connected. So I'm just putting that because it may be important for the bigger picture for the Commission to understand what's the role of the deployment committee and have true facts. So I thought I would just explain that. Obviously, you can decide when you say, well, I want to engage with that view because I think it's not correct or it's not justified about the deployment committee or about whatever, or you might say, look, I don't have no comment or something like that. But you don't have to add anything now that I've said this, unless you want to. I was just wanting to make sure that as we move forward, you understand that it may be important sometimes to engage or give a view in regard to another view. But you might say, no, I don't want to. I have no comment.
Thank you, Chair. I think the last sentence is very clear. She has views. Maybe she has some experience. And then she's saying, look, when we do this selection, it must not be based on these things that she's talking about. But for an example, the way she's putting it must not be a reward for loyalty.
And you might say you agree with that, or not?
No, Chair, I'm just making the point. If you say it must not be loyalty to the party, why should you not take people who are loyal to the party?
Yes.
If they have skills and everything, you know them, they are people who interact all the time.
Well,
why must we say, no, because we are loyal to the party, we are not taking you?
Well, you might say it would be wrong to say somebody must be appointed simply on the basis of loyalty to the party and on no other basis. But if loyalty to the party is one of a number of factors, including qualifications, experience, and whatever, then you might say there is nothing wrong with that. I'm not sure.
Yes, absolutely true. I'm not necessarily saying all other elements that she's putting here.
Yes.
You should. The fact that it should not also be loyalty to the faction, etc. She's expressing a view. She must be having a particular experience. Because indeed, you can't have a kind of a government which is based on factions. That's not the issue. I'm not saying the statement is wrong, but
yes,
it is her view because she must have come across something.
Yes, okay.
I'm sure.
Yes, okay.
I'm saying those people look at the capabilities and suitabilities of people, not whether this person agrees with me politically or whatever.
Just to summarize then, as I understand what you have said, Mr. Zuma, about the issue of loyalty, is that loyalty is an indicator of the willingness and ability to implement the policies of the ruling party. Do I understand your evidence correctly?
No, I'm not saying the loyalty covers all of those elements.
Is it part
That's
of it?
That's why I made a very broad point as an example, that there's no party in the world that wins elections and then forget about the supporters and the people and look for other people who don't know whether they are going to sabotage your work in order to make you to lose the next elections.
All right. Can we move on then to what is said in paragraphs 24 and 25? I'm not sure it's appropriate to enter into an historical debate about the issues raised by Ms. Hogan in paragraph 24 and 25, and I'll try and summarize it, and if you wish to take your time to read those paragraphs, please do so. But what she has said is that after the Polokwane conference, which she describes as divisive, there were factions within the ANC, and these factional battles, as she calls them in the ANC, had an effect on who was appointed. She says her own words are, "These factional battles in the ANC only serve to encourage and entrench nepotism and patronage from within the ranks of the ANC and the tripartite alliance, and this would have very damaging consequences for SOEs and our economy." If one takes it expressed in a more neutral fashion, I think what she is saying, and would invite your comment on, Mr. Zuma, is that there were factions in the ANC after Polokwane, and that membership of or loyalty to one or other faction was a factor in the appointment of people to SOE boards and positions, and that was damaging to those SOEs in the economies. That is sanitized of the language, what I think is being said.
Well, Chair, I'm not sure how deep we get into these issues. I was trying to indicate that she's expressing her own views here. I don't know whether I should now debate those views, because it is not true after Polokwane. It's not true that people entrench their own side. It's not true. There is evidence that comrades that you would have been on opposite side in terms of supporting a candidate, they were put in the structures of government in other places. It's not true. I am not sure whether I'm keen to debate her views. I was trying to run away from this because she's expressing her views.
Well, let me say this, that as you will have seen when you read her statement, later on she talks about, maybe to put neutrally, certain challenges that she says she met with in trying to have CEOs appointed to certain SOEs and boards. And it may well be that in saying this, she is trying to indicate that these problems of factions ultimately affected maybe governance in SOEs and so on. So I'm just saying that at this stage, but I'm quite happy to leave it to you when you are given a chance to comment, to make your judgment at this stage if you don't think it's important. But and Mr. Pretorius, if he feels that it's important to have your views, he will indicate. But the first opportunity is for you to get a chance to say, oh, this is what this witness is saying, and this is what I have to say about that, if I have anything.
No, my problem, Chair, is that here is a report to a commission. It gets into some happenings in the party, and they are not accurate. They're not accurate. We'll end up now discussing the ANC politics, because if you put that statement general, we have got to do your selection fairly.
Yes.
Partly, it cannot be that as for an example, the deployment committee is a committee. You can't have that committee with almost everybody coming from a particular faction. It can't be. People there they are not appointed on the basis of that. They are actually appointed by the structures. You know, firstly, the there's a working committee that looks at this, then the NEC that appoints these people of the deployment committee. You can't say the whole NEC is a faction, and therefore it has appointed its faction. I'm not sure we want to get into those discussions. That's why I kept on saying, look, she's more or less expressing her own views. She was part of the process.
Well,
I'm not sure we want to debate that.
Well, maybe let me say this. The ANC is the ruling party and has been the ruling party since 1994. It may be that certain things that it does or certain things it doesn't do may be said to affect government in certain ways. With that understanding, it is possible that there are certain things that are really party things and that are ANC that the Commission might have to look at insofar as it can be said that they may have had or they may have a bearing on how government has been working or how it has dealt with certain things. So I just want to mention that. It might be difficult, there might be different views as to which one falls within, legitimately within that ambit, which one falls outside. But I just want to say, it might be that just because certain things are things that happen within the ANC, it may be that they can't be excluded completely because of the status of the ANC being the ruling party. But obviously, somewhere one must draw the line. So I think that I would leave it to Mr. Pretorius to see how he deals with it, but I think what the Commission, what one would be looking at is that, and what everybody would be looking at is that, as the former president of the ANC, you would be very knowledgeable about its structures and processes, and therefore you are in a position to enlighten the Commission on any things if there are views that are expressed which don't correctly reflect the ANC. You would be in a position to say, no, that's not the ANC. This is the ANC's position. And to the extent that the ANC, where you think the ANC needs to be defended in regard to how it's impacting on government, it may be that you would do that. It may be that it's somebody else, I'm not sure. So I would leave it to Mr. Pretorius to see how far he takes it, but as long as you know that whenever these questions are put to you, first and foremost, it's an opportunity to comment if you think you should, and if you don't think you want to comment, then you can say that.
No, Chair. For an example, she quotes a particular conference and what happened thereafter.
Yes, yes.
Now, it's not true.
Yes.
Also, this process is very thorough. If, for an example, you talk about selecting either head of department or whatever other processes, even if the process started with the deployment committee, once the minister, if you take the DG, has gone through the process, firstly, there is a committee that sits to interview, and they will be scoring at the points as they interview. And you can't say somebody who has scored very poorly because he's in my faction. No, sorry about this work, I want this one. It's never done. It is the process of the people who are sitting there who might not necessarily be in one grouping politically, because they are looking at, are we getting the right person? That process is taken to, this committee is small. What then they recommend finally is taken to the Cabinet Committee. And the Cabinet Committee is a big committee. The President, the Deputy President participates in those discussions, discussing these very individuals. Then the Cabinet Committee recommends to the Cabinet. That person, wherever that person started, will end up being discussed by the Cabinet to take the final decision. So I don't know, how do you succeed to have your clique with you? Because these people who are meeting here, they may have different views about these matters. They are looking at the capability of the candidate. And it's discussed there with it's now the entire cabinet. In fact, there's a serious debate, even discussing individuals in the cabinet. Some people will say, look, this candidate is not right. I know these are the witnesses, etc. At times, the cabinet will say, we're not accepting this candidate. It's not just like as if you pick and walk. The process is thorough. That's the point I'm just making.
No, I think that way of responding probably is important because, in effect, I think you are saying she may be saying these things because of certain specific instances that she knows of, but you are saying your understanding and your experience of how the deployment committee and government handles these things is the following. So, yes, thank you. Mr. Pretorius.
I'm about to move to a new topic. It's 14 minutes past. Is this a convenient time?
We'll take the tea adjournment and resume at 11:30. We adjourn.
So hello, I'm freezing. Okay. Life has never been fair anyway. Yeah, sure. Gosh. A very good morning to you, Blaine. Of course, you saw a judge there who is in his very cool demeanor.
before Mr. Pretorius proceeds, I just want to go back to an issue that we dealt with earlier about loyalty to a party and appointments. You posed a question, and I don't know whether you expressed a view, and I want to establish that. You posed a question as to why loyalty to the party should not count in an appointment, whether somebody should be appointed. Did I understand that part correctly, that you posed a question along those lines, or did I misunderstand?
No, I did not pose a question.
Or did you express a view?
I was just explaining what happens.
Yes.
Because that's a universal thing.
Yes.
Parties can't take people who don't like the party to come and work for the government of that party. That's the point I was just making.
Yes. Maybe let me just ask, is it your understanding that loyalty to the ruling party or a political party should be a factor in appointments that are made in government?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that should be the case. I'm saying political parties globally, once they win elections, they take their people to the government to place them, because those people are expected to implement the policies. So loyalty goes without saying. It's not the only, but it does not mean you cannot take somebody who is a professional, who is willing to participate in government. I was just dealing with it insofar as it appears here as a point that was made.
Yes, no, I think I understand you to say loyalty to a party should never be the only factor.
Yes.
That part I understand. Mm-hmm. The question I ask is whether it should be a factor at all. Whether you...
No,
and I'm simply asking it because you and I had an engagement earlier on around that, and I thought you had asked the question, why should it not be considered? But I think you have said no, you were not asking a question. So then I think maybe it might be good, because somebody else might have understood the way that I understood. It might be important if you have a view on that to make it clear what your view is, and because it leads to the question of what would have been expected of government ministers and the president himself and the deputy president who sits on the deployment committee when among the names that they see for a particular post, they see somebody that comes from the deployment committee. Were they expected to take into account that this must be this must be somebody with loyalty to the party, or were they not supposed to? And you can answer in terms of your own understanding, which may be right, which may be wrong, but your own understanding with the experience that you have both in the ANC and in government.
No, what I was saying, I was not saying that it should be one of the things that you search for. In fact, it does not even arise generally in the discussions.
Yes.
The problem is that it is here as if it is a big factor. It's not.
Okay.
That's why, rather than to get into the details, I was saying all parties in the world, when they win elections, they bring people they trust, people who are loyal to the party, people who have got professions. It's not a factor. It's not the only factor. In fact, in the discussions, you will find that this issue has never arisen. Are you loyal to the ANC? You can't. That's why I was saying these are individual views, perhaps emanating from individual experiences, I don't know.
Yes. Okay. Well, as you explained now, I had some things to the effect, not the only fact.
Okay.
So I go back to the question whether, as far as you know, with your experience in the ANC, with your experience in government, is it something, was it one of the factors that at least the ANC as the ruling party expected government ministers and the president and the president to have regard to when they select who should fill certain positions?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
When for an example, advertisements are made for a particular position, many citizens of the in the country, some of whom we don't even know they belong to which party or they believe in what policy, they apply and they go through the process. No one in that kind of interview asks the political issues. It does not feature.
Okay.
It's a given.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pretorius?
Thank you. Mr. Zuma, on page 405, paragraph 28 and following, Ms. Hogan relates her experiences in relation to Transnet and appointments within Transnet. And certain of the detail of her narrative mentions engagements with yourself, and I therefore need to put them to you for your comment. Just by way of background, in paragraph 29, Ms. Hogan refers to the resignation of Ms. Maria Ramos as CEO of Transnet in February 2009. She then says that the Transnet board, after a careful selection process and extensive engagement with the then Minister of Public Enterprises, Bridget Mabandla, recommended Pravin Gordhan. Do you know of those events? It's not necessary to go into any detail, but just by way of background to what follows.
I think that happened, yeah.
Yes, and she says in paragraph 30, a week later Mr. Gordhan withdrew his candidature, and several months later he became the Minister of Finance. That again by way of background.
Yes.
But what she says in paragraph 30 is that what she describes as a fiction arose at the time which was untrue, that Siyabonga Gama, Mr. Gama, then CEO of Transnet Freight Rail, was second on the list of preferred candidates for the position of Transnet CEO. She says there was no such preferential list. Do you know anything about that?
There was no
preferential list. She says that at the time, there was a belief or an understanding amongst some, a fiction, she says, that there was a list of preferred candidates, and that second on that list was Mr. Gama. Do you know anything about that?
I remember that, yeah.
I'm sorry?
I say I remember that.
Now, do you say there was such a list? She says there was no such list. If you, let me just ask you to look at paragraph 30 and read to you what she says. A fiction arose at that time which was untrue, that Siyabonga Gama, Mr. Gama, then CEO of TFR, that's Transnet Freight Rail, was second on the list of preferred candidates for the position of Transnet CEO. There was no such preferential list. Do you have a comment?
Well, I may not remember the details of who was in the list or not, but all I know is that Gama himself had also applied. And I know that Mr. Gordhan as well. So when he withdrew his the candidature, and I think the discussion was the second one, instead of starting another process, because Gama was known. He had worked there for a long time, his capabilities and everything. And in the process, those who were doing the process felt that here is a man who will fit into this kind of situation. There was then, I think, a bit of a discussion. Other people wanted that we should have another round or something. But at the end, this process that I'm talking about, that many people get involved, the view in the process was that, but this man, we know him. He has been working here. He's capable enough. And then at the end, I think there was kind of a stronger view that, no, let us take the decision that we should take him. It was a process of the discussion, particularly from, I think, the cabinet committee even to the cabinet. So it was a discussion. It was not one person talking to the other. It was that process I talked about that produced that result.
All right. That would have occurred shortly before or after May 2009. You say there was discussion about the next in line, Mr. Gama, being appointed to the position. But she says something in paragraph 31 as follows. After Mr. Gordon's withdrawal...
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. He said the next in line. That might suggest as if you are saying he said the next on the list, whereas he said he wouldn't know details about the lists. So you might wish to, you might not have intended that.
What did you say about Mr. Gama being discussed in the absence of Mr. Gordon? I understood you said that his candidature was recommended by some as being the next person for consideration. I don't want to get into a debate about in line or lists or anything.
Because he had applied himself.
Sorry?
Yeah, as far as I remember, he had applied as well for the job. So, in a sense, in the selection committee, I think he was one of those who had applied.
And did some feel that he should, in the absence of Mr. Gordon, be appointed to the post?
That's what I remember.
Okay. The selection committee you're referring to, what selection committee are you referring to?
The minister. The minister, if he or she wants to appoint a DG, she then forms a panel that will be interviewing people.
Right.
That would that be? You're talking about a DG now, Mr. Gama. Wasn't going to be a DG, but you are making an example.
Yeah, an example, yes.
In the case of a DG, would that selection committee that the relevant minister creates or establishes, would it include cabinet ministers?
Yes, yes. Cabinet ministers or deputy ministers as well.
And would it consist only of members of the executive, or it could include people outside of the executive?
Not generally, people of the executive.
People of the executive, okay. That's in the case of a DG.
Not only the DG.
Yes.
Even board members.
Even board members.
Even board members.
And CEOs.
The process is the same, yes.
And CEOs of SOEs.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
In paragraph 31, again by way of background, Mr. Zuma, and that's on page 406, Ms. Hogan said, after Mr. Gordon's withdrawal, the board had difficulties getting a firm direction from government. They wanted to commence with a new search, but could not get an unequivocal endorsement to do this. At this point, the election had begun. She does say that Minister Mabandla did, however, approve the appointment of the Chief Financial Officer of Transnet, Mr. Chris Wells, as the acting CEO of Transnet, and Anoj Singh, a Transnet employee, as the acting Chief Financial Officer of Transnet. Again, by way of background, do you have any comment? Do you recall this happening?
I'm not sure because the withdrawal of Praveen brought some activities, and I may not remember everything, but there was activities. This may be so, it may not, but I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
In relation to the further search, it is said in paragraph 32 on page 406, the Transnet board nevertheless embarked on a further search as they felt that they could not abandon their fiduciary responsibilities. On the 18th of June 2009, the Transnet chairperson, Mr. Pashwana, met with me and submitted a memorandum dated 9 June 2009, which was annexed to the original statement, which amongst other things recommended the appointment of a candidate for the position of CEO. This was a highly capable and experienced black candidate who had the requisite experience and admirable managerial capabilities. It seems that in this narrative being related here that there was a further search embarked upon by the Transnet board, and this resulted in a memorandum being submitted to the minister for the appointment of a highly experienced, capable and experienced black candidate. It appears that that person was Sipho Maseko. Do you know of that?
Well, I don't remember exactly now whether, but the name Sipho Maseko I remember. I can't just remember the background, the details.
And she says, it is important to note that the board had nominated only one candidate for the appointment, that is Mr. Maseko.
Mm-hmm.
In any event, if we could go then to paragraph 33, because this now becomes directly relevant to your own involvement, Mr. Zuma. She says in paragraph 33 at the bottom of page 406, approximately a month after my appointment as the Minister of DPE, I met with President Zuma and gave him a full background about the developments in Transnet. I informed him that the Transnet AGM was coming up very soon and that a GCEO and a chairperson of Transnet would have to be appointed as a matter of urgency. I briefed him about the board's candidate of choice, whom I too endorsed, and the inquiry potentially implicating Mr. Gama. Do you recall that engagement?
Yes, I do.
Is that a fair summary of what was discussed?
Yes.
Then in paragraph 34 on page 407, Ms. Hogan says the following: I was shocked and disappointed when President Zuma informed me that he was adamant that Mr. Gama was his only choice for GCEO. I informed him that that was not possible and that Mr. Gama was not the board's choice, and I could not override the board as they had undergone a very professional selection process. Do you have any comment about that?
I just read it, if you like.
Please.
Okay.
I don't remember myself saying these things. How could I have said this when somebody is being charged with serious charges? And I would say, no, take the person. I don't remember me insisting on this.
Well, Perhaps, in fairness, we should take it step by step, Mr. Zuma. What she says is at that meeting, you informed her that Mr. Gama was your only choice for GCEO.
Was?
Your choice for GCEO.
No, that can't be.
And not just choice, you were right, your only choice.
It couldn't be like that. We don't work like that. As I say, there is a process that determines who becomes either the winning candidate. What the ministers at times do, they will come to the president just to brief the president, not to discuss whether we should do this or not. And I'm not even fond of making such determined statements, really. I would not have said this, not at all.
Well, I just want to say this is one of those parts of her statement where it's quite important that your answer be the answer that is really to the best of your recollection, because the way she has put it is quite emphatic. So it's important to distinguish between you don't recall and I didn't say it or I couldn't have said it, so that one can understand it.
I think that's, I was saying I couldn't have said this.
You could not have said
No.
this. Yes.
Because it means I would also be undermining the process itself. At a level when the minister consults, you might express a view or not, but it does not determine the final decision. Because the final decision must be a product of the process. I would not have said this because I would have been saying, this is my person, finish. It doesn't work like that. It's
Well,
not
certainly that's the impression that comes out of that paragraph.
Not at all.
That's the impression that one gets when one reads that paragraph, that you were saying, this is my only choice, and you are not too prepared to look at another candidate. That's
not
my
at
impression
all.
of what she is saying.
No. I could not have said so.
You could not have said so.
No.
Yes. I understand two things from your answer, Mr. Zuma. Firstly, that you would not have said that. Secondly, as I understand what you said, that a statement such as that would show that this was a complete deviation from the proper process.
Absolutely. Because I would be saying there was no need for discussions. This is a choice I've made, finish. No, the process doesn't work like that.
It follows that the second sentence would also not have been part of that conversation, but let me not make any assumptions and let me put it to you. I informed him, that is Ms. Hogan informing yourself, that that was not possible and that Mr. Gama was not the board's choice and I could not override the board as they had undergone a very professional selection process. Do you recall that being said at the meeting?
I don't recall this.
And then, do you recall being informed that Mr. Gama was the subject of an inquiry?
Sorry?
Do you recall being informed by Ms. Hogan at that meeting that Mr. Gama was the subject of an inquiry?
Yes, there was a time where Mr. Gama was accused. I remember the period.
Yes.
I'm not very sure whether we discussed this. I think it came as just a report about Mr. Gama, not discussing whether we should take him or not. That's why I'm saying these answers that are put here that I said them, I don't remember them.
Then
I never said this.
Are you saying you do have a recollection of the fact that at some stage you got to know that Mr. Gama was facing some disciplinary process, but you can't say whether you were told that in a meeting with Ms. Hogan.
No.
You are not sure about that.
In fact, it was a well-known fact
Yes.
that Gama faced charges.
Yes.
Everybody knew in the country.
Yes. And is your recollection that that was known at the time when an appointment of the GCEO of Transnet was supposed to happen?
Yes,
Okay.
because the allegations against Gama took a long time.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
In the last 4 lines of that paragraph, Ms. Hogan says the following. She says, President Zuma said that if that was my view, no appointment whatsoever was to be made at Transnet until Mr. Gama's disciplinary process was over. We agreed that I would provide him with more detailed information for him to further apply his mind to. Do you recall anything of that nature being said at that consultation with yourself?
I've got difficulties with this with this report because a consultation that the ministers do, they will be reporting. They will be saying this is what has happened, and me as a minister, this is what I think, or the board, this is what the board thinks. And then, is there any other process that is going forward? You report that. And from the position of the president, you say, fine, go ahead. When things are okay, you'll come back. I don't remember discussing an individual like Gama to say this cannot happen, this is my choice. I could not have said so.
Maybe I could say this, and maybe it's something that comes later in her statement. I'm saying I want to say something that maybe comes later in her statement.
Okay.
Maybe the noise of the aircon might be affecting us. We'll see what we can do if it interferes. I think at some stage in her statement, when one reads it, one gets the impression, and I want to put it no higher than that, gets the impression that she may, in regard to these appointments, whether of a CEO of an SOE or the chairperson of a board, that she would be putting forward to cabinet, that she would want first to have an idea whether the president has no problem with a particular candidate. That's the impression I get. She might not be saying that. And in a way, when I read that, I thought, well, maybe if you are going to a certain meeting and you want to put a certain proposal, you might want to check with certain people who are important in the meeting if they have any problem with your proposal, because if they have a problem, you might wish to rethink. But if they are fine, you feel confident to then take it forward to a bigger meeting. That's what I was thinking. So it may well be that if she did come to you with the names, it may be that the idea was to check whether you had any problem with the names. Would that sound like something that would happen at cabinet with ministers?
Normally, ministers would come to the president before. It's not just a thing which perhaps does not happen. It does.
Does happen, yes.
To say, the DG, I'm recommending this one or whatever.
Yes, yes.
For the president to know. Yes. They could also engage in the discussion.
Yes,
it's
yes,
possible.
Yes, yes.
And the president might have views and say, have you checked this or whatever? Well, what I'm saying, the president can't say you can't do this.
Yes, okay.
Because that decision must be taken by the collective.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
And do your comments apply equally to an SOE as well as a government department?
Sorry?
No, it's just been drawn to my attention that your comments might have been directed at government departments rather than state-owned entities.
Even the state-owned enterprises, they come as well.
She proceeds in paragraph 35, Mr. Zuma, to say, the problem was that President Zuma, 2 of my cabinet colleagues, and elements within the ANC and the tripartite alliance, including the Secretary General Gwedi Mantashe, were very vocal that the candidate of their choice, Mr. Gama, would become the next GCEO of Transnet, despite the fact that the black-dominated board of Transnet, after a rigorous and professional selection process, were clearly of the view that Mr. Gama was not an appropriate candidate. Her comments then are extended in so far as they relate to support for Mr. Gama to a range of other persons and entities, or persons rather. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I'm not sure here because she's now including many people around this name.
Yes. She
She knew.
If I may just put it to you on the basis that's fair to you, she says they were very vocal about it.
That's what she say.
Yes. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't know. I don't know because we don't meet as an alliance to discuss those matters. Those are just government matters. So I'm not sure, as you can see, she's really pulling everybody to an issue of a specific government. She's pulling the Secretary General and everybody else. We never discussed this with the Secretary General or other alliance people. As a minister, maybe from the union point of view, people must have been coming to her, I don't know.
She said there was vocal support and widespread vocal support for Mr. Gama to be appointed as the next GCEO of Transnet. It may be that she implies, maybe not, but perhaps I should put it to that it was well known that many people supported Mr. Gama.
I'm sure as a minister, because they also do consult with the unions. Because at times unions have views about people who are appointed. For the fact that she says people are vocal, it means she has been maybe canvassing or talking to many people.
I guess that amounts to saying you can neither admit or deny that. That's what she says, and it's possible.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
What was your view, Mr. Zuma, about the appointment of Mr. Gama as GCEO of Transnet? What was your view as to whether he should be appointed or not?
I think I was looking at the process, that whatever happens at the end, that will be the decision. I did not put my preference on Gama or whoever.
What would you have, what do you think would have been your view if she told you, as she says she did, that there was a rigorous selection process that had been followed by the board of considering a number of candidates, one of whom was Mr. Gama, but that after considering all the candidates, the board had recommended Mr. Is it Maseko?
Yes.
Mr. Maseko. Do you have an idea what your normal reaction would be when a minister comes with names after a process like that? would your natural or normal reaction be if that is what the board wants and you are happy, then it's fine? Or would your position be, just give me some more information about this candidate or all these candidates, I want to look at them, I want to scrutinize them, or take it to cabinet and we'll see what cabinet says? What would be your normal reaction when a minister comes with a candidate's name after such a process?
No. In fact, in the majority of cases, that's what ministers do. To say, here is a process, the board looked at this, they prefer this one, the minister might give some details, it might not give some details, to say, therefore, the process is moving forward. Boards recommend. The boards themselves know that their recommendation could be accepted or not accepted by cabinet. And that there is no process that can be stopped halfway. It would just be to alert the president about what has happened. Partly because in the cabinet, the president would be chairing most of the time. The debate would be among the ministers, just making the president aware that these are the issues. And the minister could also express her own preference and the reasons why he or she feels this would be the right person.
And maybe I could ask this as well. Do you have any recollection whether in such a process, when a minister comes to cabinet with a name, whether he or she would include information about other candidates who were not successful according to the board, or it would just be for the information about the candidate that is being recommended? Is that something that you are able to remember, or is that something you don't remember?
At times the minister would give information about others. For an example, it might say there were so many candidates. This one is one. The concentration would be on this one. In the process of the discussion, people can say, let us hear number two. What was the kind of thing? Or the minister could mention it, even at the beginning. In other words, it varies how they presented the matter.
Okay, thank you.
In relation to SOE board appointments, do I understand it correctly?
Okay, I'm sorry. I think Mr. Skakane has got something.
Chair.
Yes.
This is poor. This is really poor.
Please come forward so I can hear you.
I know you said, Chair, I can't tell you about your jobs, but I will now.
No. I said you can make submissions and everyone must do their job.
Chair, this is,
Yes.
I must say, this is poor.
Mm-hmm.
This witness, right, comes here, you have Annexure D, which tells you what the process is. This is no expert in those processes. You have it in Annexure D in your document, and you are told by the minister. I do not think it's fair to ask someone who was head of state to explain to you the process of selecting people when you have the document that tells you from the right person. I don't think it's fair to this witness.
Well, Mr. Skakane, sometimes you have a laid down process and you have a different understanding of persons of what the actual process was that was followed. Sometimes a laid down process is not followed. So the question was meant to get what his understanding was of what the process was, as opposed to what the process was that was prescribed by law.
And Chair, if I may ask,
Yes.
what's that got to do with fraud and corruption?
It's got to do with whether where it is alleged that, as it is here, that he said he had only one choice of a candidate, whether it is possible that his understanding of the process is different from what is laid down. Genuine understanding.
Chair, I don't know. This is really poor. He's told you that he couldn't have said it. We've spent 35 minutes on a question my client has answered, and you are asking him, you're not asking him whether he wanted a deviation. He's being asked about how does the process unfold. You have a document that tells you that.
Well, Mr. Skakane, I've just said to you, you can have a law that says this is the process, and you can have people who are supposed to apply that process having a different understanding. And the question is aimed at establishing whether what his understanding was of the process.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, to just make one comment from the legal team's point of view on this issue.
Yes.
At the beginning of this commission, you made it public that its task, the task of the investigators and the legal team, was to try and understand, in relation to its terms of reference, what happened.
Yes.
To try and understand how it happened.
Yes.
And to make recommendations in regard to the correction or assurance that whatever is found to have happened, ultimately, in your recommendations, would not happen again.
Yes.
The appointment of persons to state-owned entities is an integral part of all three legs of that inquiry. It is something which is being debated intensely up to now by other witnesses, and it's something that the former president, with his knowledge and experience, can assist with, and I'm quite sure he's willing to assist with it. He's not being accused of anything in that process.
And again, Mr. Zuma, I just want to say that where you don't know, feel free to say that I don't know. Thank you.
In any event, Mr. Zuma, if we may continue. In paragraph 36, the deponent to this affidavit, Ms. Hogan, raises another concern about Mr. Gama's candidacy, and it was a report that he had been engaged in a contractual relationship with a cabinet colleague, Mr. Nyanda. Did you know anything about this allegation at the time?
Yes, I remember slightly that there was something that had happened between the two. Yes.
And do you recall that there were allegations about the propriety or lawfulness of those engagements between Mr. Nyanda and Mr. Gama? Do you recall anything about it? You do?
Yes, I remember that. I don't remember the details, but I remember the incident.
She goes on in paragraph 37 to say, notwithstanding all this, Mr. Gama's supporters claimed he was being victimized by an anti-transformation white cabal that had instituted inquiry and later disciplinary proceedings to prevent him from being appointed the GCEO. Do you know anything about those sentiments expressed by Mr. Gama's supporters? I'm not sure we need to dwell there too much, but
I think there were murmurs about the victimization or whatever. I don't remember the details, But I know that this, as I said, the Gama thing was a well-known thing in the country, the problems that he had with the company. But I can't remember the details.
She does note in paragraph 39 on page 408 that Mr. Gama was later found guilty of unwarranted criticism of Transnet executives, a charge serious enough to warrant dismissal. I don't want to go into the detail of the inquiry and the charges, but that's what she says. Do you recall that there was a guilty finding in relation to Mr. Gama's inquiry?
I think there was some conclusion, but I can't remember exactly how the final conclusion was.
I think to assist you, it'll become clearer later, so we can park that for the moment. She says in paragraph 40 on page 408, on or about 28 July 2009, I sent President Zuma a comprehensive report attached here to Mark D, with annexures detailing the selection process, the strong motivation for the appointment of the candidate that had been recommended to me by the Transnet board, details of the procurement irregularities under investigation by the Transnet Audit Committee, the corporate governance aspects of CEO appointments, including the legal opinions prepared by Mr. Michael Katz and Advocate Wim Trengrove, SC, in this regard. However, President Zuma did not respond. Did you recall receiving such a report? Would you have read it, or would a subordinate of yours have read it and advised you? What would the position have been?
No, I received the report. It was just a report like all other reports for me to know.
Right. And did you note it? Did you read it, or did you ask someone to advise you about it?
I read it. But it was a report like all other reports.
Paragraph 40, the report itself is at page 422 of bundle GGB, exhibit GGB, and it's headed Decision Memorandum. It's addressed to you as President from Ms. Barbara Hogan. It's dated the 28th of July 2009.
What page are you in?
422, read 422.
Mr. Pretorius?
Yes, I've got
I'm
it.
sorry, I thought you were looking at it.
No,
Thank you.
I've got it.
Let's leave aside the legal advice contained in the report for the moment. We may return to it if it's necessary or you want to, but there is a summary of the report at page 423. Which says in paragraph 2.1, following the resignation of Ms. Ramos, the board initiated a CEO recruitment process to ensure continuity in Transnet business operations. As a consequence of the withdrawal of the board's unanimously recommended preferred candidate, Mr. Pravin Gordhan, it says, it should not be, the board extended its search for a suitable candidate and has now recommended a further preferred candidate with 2 other shortlisted preferred candidates for appointment as CEO. In paragraph 2.2, she says, or the report says, the recruitment and selection process conducted by the board raised questions regarding the appropriate authority to appoint the CEO, as well as the correct process to follow. Let's leave that aside for the moment. It says in 2.3, the recruitment process was initiated at an unfortunate time when the board was also undertaking investigations into alleged corrupt activities against some of the senior executives at Transnet. This time overlap may have raised concerns regarding the process and criteria followed in the recruitment and selection of candidates. The process conducted by the board has been assessed and found to be robust, insofar as it was referenced to labour law compliant and internationally recognized candidate profiling. The important point in the summary, at least, is made at paragraph 2.4. Due to the delay in the appointment of the CEO and media speculation, it has now become critical for the shareholder to resolve on the appointment of the CEO and to re-establish leadership stability at Transnet. This memorandum serves to address questions and concerns raised with a view to agreement on the way forward in appointing a CEO for Transnet as soon as possible. Do you have any comment in relation to 2.4? I would assume, but perhaps I shouldn't, that it would be in any state-owned entity critical for there to be leadership stability at all times, and that would include Transnet, and that undue delay in the appointment of a suitable candidate to CEO position would, in general circumstances, be undesirable. Would you accept that?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure. I'm not
Sorry,
sure
did
whether
you
that
nod?
was
I
an
missed that.
answer, whether there was an answer or not.
No, I was saying yes, there was.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
I thought I nodded.
okay.
Sorry. It's just that the record would not pick up a
Oh,
nod.
okay,
We
okay,
may be
okay.
filmed for other reasons, but not for that reason. In paragraph 3.13, she summarizes the object of the memorandum. It's at page 426, Mr. Zuma. She says, in view of the aforementioned, it is considered prudent that the board,
Sorry, where are you?
page 426, paragraph
426.
3.13, I'm sorry,
426.
426, red 426, para 313.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Do you have it, Mr. Zuma?
Yeah.
Yes, she says, in view of the aforementioned, it is considered prudent that the board, in consultation with the relevant minister, conducts a recruitment and selection process for a CEO and recommends suitable candidates to the minister for consideration and appointment, subject to approval by cabinet.
Yes.
That is, in very, very broad summary, the process.
Yeah.
And I think you've agreed to that. She then details the recruitment and selection process of the CEO of Transnet that was followed, And she goes into some detail in paragraph 3.2.2 of the type of procedures conducted in such a process by the board's Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee. Probably not necessary to go into any detail, but just to remark that there's a thorough process of examination of candidates on a number of criteria. You note that, yes. And that's in accordance with your own understanding.
Yes, yes.
The paragraph 3.2, various candidates are mentioned, including Mr. Gama and several others. And then in paragraph 3.2.4, by way of background, there's a recordal that the board unanimously recommended Mr. Pravin Gordhan. But I'd like to go to the next page, if I may, because we know that his candidature was withdrawn. To the top of page 428, where it says the preferred internal candidate, Mr. Siyabonga Gama, was thoroughly considered, but the board is of a view that his assessment showed that there are important gaps relative to the requirements for the position. According to the independent assessment and board evaluation, he currently requires greater cognitive development to handle the complexity of this position. You say you would have had regard to this report. Do you recall that observation being conveyed to you?
Which one? I was just looking at your page.
I'm sorry,
mean,
page 428, if you want the first paragraph.
Page 33?
428, I think. Did you say 428?
428.
At the top. At the top. Must I ask somebody to come and assist you?
Yes.
Yes.
So.
Good. Leratu.
So.
Go and look for page 428 at the top.
Is it page on the red?
On the red one.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Each time we talk about a page, it will be the red numbers at the top.
Yes, okay.
Yes, okay.
Fine, I was looking at the paragraphs.
Oh, okay.
Are you holding me to that, DCJ?
Well, you had to deviate yesterday at some stage. Yeah, okay. Do you want to read it and then put your question again?
Yes, may I read it to you? Perhaps I should
Are you reading it from page 27 up to 28,
yes,
428?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Chair.
the paragraph he's going to read, Mr. Zuma, starts on the previous page, which is 427 at the bottom, and continues at the top of page 428.
Paragraph 3.2.5 on
Page
red
427.
427. I'm going to read it. In addition,
But I think he must see it as well.
all right.
Can you see it?
What is the paragraph?
4232,
3.2.5
yeah. At the bottom.
3.2.5.
on
Yes,
the
at
bottom
the
of page red 427.
Yes.
You have it?
Yes, okay.
It reads, in addition, the board disclosed the names of all the candidates shortlisted for final interviews. The list was not presented in order of priority and comprised of the following names: Ms. Moses, Mr. Gama, Mr. Gloti, Mr. Ketso Gordhan, and Mr. Pravin Gordhan. Regarding the assessment of the other candidates, the board reported to the minister that, quote, the other candidates were found to be less suitable for the position or not suitable at all. The preferred internal candidate, Mr. Siyabonga Gama, was thoroughly considered, but the board is of a view that his assessment showed that there are important gaps relative to the requirements for the position. According to the independent assessment and board evaluation, he currently requires greater cognitive development to handle the complexity of this position. In short, the board's position was that after consideration of his assessment, including an independent assessment, it determined that he was not suitable for appointment to the post. Were you aware of that sentiment, and that that was the sentiment of the board?
Yes, I think so.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That sentiment is repeated in paragraph 3.2.7 on page 428, which reads, on 9 March 2009, the Transnet Board provided the Minister with a summary of assessments of all the shortlisted candidates and in addition informed the Minister of allegations of misconduct involving one of the shortlisted candidates, Mr. Siyabonga Gama. The board cited the reasons why Mr. Siyabonga Gama was not recommended for appointment in the first place and the inherent pending uncertainty regarding the outcome of the investigations against him as to why it should read, he should not now be appointed to the position of CEO. Were you aware of those sentiments?
Yes.
And then it concludes, well, a conclusion in paragraph 3.2.12 on page 429. After the interviews were conducted, the Corporate Governance and Nominations Committee recommended 3 preferred candidates who could fill the position of CEO, namely Mr. Sipho Maseko, Mr. Tao Morwe, and Mr. Khomotso Pihlela. With full and unanimous support of the Transnet Board, recommended Mr. Sipho Maseko for appointment as CEO, and then it goes into the reasons why he was recommended. Were you aware of that recommendation?
I think so, yes.
Then there is a section of the report addressed to you dealing with the further processes, particularly those conducted on Transnet's behalf by Ernst & Young and others in relation to various matters relevant to the board's conclusion. And if one goes to page 433, if I may, paragraph 3.4.1, the report reads,
let him get
paragraph
there first.
page 433, paragraph 3.4.1. Do you have it?
Yes.
As executive authority and shareholder representative of the state, it is incumbent upon the Minister of Public Enterprises to exercise the rights of the shareholder to appoint the CEO of Transnet in general meeting. In keeping with company law and corporate good governance codes such as King 3, it is important that the shareholder engages in a meaningful and constructive fashion with the board in selecting a CEO to lead a company, to lead the company. Do you have any comment on that? Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah.
In this regard, the paragraph continues, finding a suitable candidate for appointment as Transnet CEO, considering the company's impact on the economy, the magnitude of its infrastructure build program, and global economic context, is a task with high impact and potential risk. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yes.
Then if we may proceed to page 434. The conclusions of this section relating to the process from a factual point of view are set out in paragraph 3.4.5 on page 434. Do you have that?
Yes.
The first bullet if I may summarize, mentions that the recruitment process conducted by the board has been robust in assessing both internal and external candidates. The second bullet says the investigation of alleged misconduct on the part of Mr. Siyabonga Gama is not trumped up or trivial, but potentially significant, and the board will be failing in its fiduciary duty if it does not complete the investigation in accordance with due process. You would have been informed then of both those observations, I take it.
The microphone must be able to catch the response, yes.
Okay.
Was your answer yes?
Okay.
Yes, okay.
The third bullet reads, the board is confident that the substance and method of the recruitment and selection process page 45, that's over the page, the third bullet. If I may read the first bullet, at no stage did the board indicate that it has shortlisted Mr. Gama as second in line, preferred candidate to Mr. Pravin Gordhan, and the board embarked on an extended search after the withdrawal of Mr. Pravin Gordhan, as it was not confident that the other candidates available, including Mr. Siyabonga Gama, was suitable for the position. The board would have communicated, or that would have been communicated to you in the report. Am I correct?
I think so.
The next bullet reads, I have had an opportunity to peruse the independent assessments in respect of all the candidates interviewed by the board and have confidence in the recommendation by the board that Mrs. Sipho Maseko, Tao Mordwe, and Khomotso Pehlele are, in order of preference, the most suitable candidates for appointment as CEO. That also would have been communicated to yourself in the report, that this had the board's approval and executive authority approval.
Yes.
And then in the last bullet, the urgency of the appointment is stressed. It reads, in the interest of establishing leadership stability at Transnet, an appointment of a CEO be made without undue delay, and that the ultimate criteria should be the confidence that the board and the shareholder has in the competence of the candidate to lead the organization. Do you have any comment in relation to that observation?
No, no comment.
Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it?
Sorry?
Do you accept that?
Well, he says no comment. No comment says he has
Is
no
that
opinion
because you
on
don't
the
wish to comment,
said
or
no
because
comment.
you'd have no issue with it? That's what I wanted to clarify. Do you have any issue with that?
No, I don't have an issue.
And then finally, the recommendation is at page 436. It is recommended that the President notes the contents of this memorandum and approves the submission of a cabinet memorandum recommending the appointment of Mr. Sipho Maseko as Transnet CEO. It seems, before I ask you to comment, Mr. Zuma, that the process here was that the board would have undertaken its selection process, recorded that selection process, and presented it to you in this memorandum. I don't know what other processes might have been followed, and asked you to approve the submission of a cabinet memorandum recommending the appointment of Mr. Sipho Maseko as Transnet CEO. So you would have been involved prior to it going to cabinet, as I understand it here, as a matter of fact, whatever the other processes might have been. Did you respond to this recommendation?
I think so. I think I responded, if I remember.
Maybe before you make a final answer on that or move on to this, I see that at the end of that report, Ms. Barbara Hogan was asking you to note the contents of the report.
Yes.
And to approve that to approve the submission of a cabinet memorandum recommending the appointment. I'm mentioning it because earlier on, I think you did emphasize that ministers would come to the president for the president to note.
Yes.
Before certain matters where they would then be taken to cabinet.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Just before we leave the report, Mr. Zuma, again, this is really a request for some information and assistance from you. If one goes to page 446, this is part of an opinion.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. I think I may have interrupted both you and Mr. Zuma. You had asked him a question whether he had responded to this report, and I think he had indicated that he thought he had, but
Yes,
he might not
I'll come
have
back
finished.
to that, Chair, because I just
Yes.
don't want to leave the report now, and I'm
Yes, well, I want to know the
friend will
answer.
allow me to do so.
No, but I want to know the answer.
No, well,
Yes. Mr. Zuma, did you respond to this memorandum, if you remember, this report?
There were so many memorandums.
You can't remember?
You know, if they come like this, unless there is a problem,
Yes.
where you could say this, no, it cannot move. Generally,
Yes.
because we are not deciding the final thing,
Yes.
it's allow the process to go.
Yes.
Yes.
So normally you would
Yes.
grant the approval that a minister is asking for unless there was a problem.
Yes. At times, ministers don't even come. At times, they send the document.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
look at the document. What is important is that if at all there's a problem, I'll then indicate that, no, don't take it to the cabinet right now.
As yet.
Until we discuss it. But generally,
Yes.
it's just a formality, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as to what you did with regard to this one, you are not able to remember, or you are able to remember?
No, I'm saying I'm not able to remember.
Okay.
Because they come all the time.
Yes.
To remember one in the
Yes.
many of them.
Okay.
Because it's not coming for me to discuss.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
to say this is what we've done. The
Yes.
process has come up to this point.
Yes.
We are now going to the cabinet.
Yes.
Normally, if I did not, for an example, say anything, the memorandum goes.
Okay.
If there's anything that is particular, I would then say, Minister, the memorandum, so and so, there's a problem I would like to discuss with you.
Yes.
Or I will discuss the problem.
Yes.
It doesn't mean, if for an example I did not respond, then the memorandum does not go. It goes the process,
Yes.
particularly the officials. They will be talking more For an example, the official from the minister will say to the official who deal with the cabinet things, has the president said anything on this one? They'll say, no, nothing, no problem, it goes.
Yes.
Now, I'm just saying, and there are many where that happens.
Yes.
I think if we take that process, it did not necessarily, even if you don't agree with it or not, it must go to cabinet.
Yes. So if ever the president were to say to a minister, no, don't take this one to cabinet as yet, I want to discuss something with you about it, it would be something quite important.
Yes, absolutely.
If it's not something so important, the idea would be to say, take it there, we will discuss at cabinet.
Absolutely.
Yes. But in the presidency, would there be records of any correspondence if, for example, you can't remember now, but if you did respond by way of a memo to the minister or a letter, would you know whether there would be such records in the presidency, or you wouldn't know?
In this process, we don't necessarily write to
ministers.
To the ministers.
Okay.
Either you ask the minister to come to say, I seek a clarification here or so.
Yes.
Or you talk to the, even to the official from the presidency or the people who are in charge of the cabinet, the secretariat. So tell Minister so and so there's this kind of an issue.
Okay.
Maybe we'll clarify it in the meeting or unless the matter is more serious.
Okay.
When the president feels this cannot pass.
Yes. Okay.
Simply because the deeper discussion about anything here will be in the cabinet.
Okay.
The president at times might feel, this one, but I should not delay this. But in the meeting, the president will say at his own time, Minister, just clarify this one. It depends how it goes.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
May I ask Mr. Zuma, the memorandum having been submitted to you with a recommendation, who would have in your office had to ensure that it went further to cabinet? Would there be a responsibility within the presidency to do that? How would that work?
Yes, it is the cabinet secretariat who do the up and down, whether the thing must go or not go, or whatever. For the president is to look at the thing, would be aware of what is happening, also with an aim of guiding the meeting properly. And the secretariat, if there's something, for an example, because they know the process, that they don't think is fine, they could even deal with the department on their own to say, please put this right or something.
Okay.
Or alert the president.
Yes, okay.
Before we leave the report or memorandum that was given to you, I'd just like to ask you one question to assist us. If you have no recollection or ability to answer, that's also fine. But if one goes to page 446, read 446, at the bottom of the page, paragraph 5, you'll see reference to a protocol. And under the heading General 5.1, it reads, the protocol was published by the Department of Public Enterprises in 1997 with a view to inculcating good governance in the SOEs in accordance with King Code of 2002. The protocol does not have legislative effect, but sets out the principles of corporate governance for SOEs. The protocol also deals with the appointment, disqualification, and removal of directors. Do you know anything about that protocol?
Yes, I remember it slightly, yeah. I think there is. I can't remember the details in it.
Yes.
But there was a protocol.
There's just an interesting paragraph quoted in the next paragraph under the head Appointment of Directors, paragraph 5.1.6.1 in inverted commas, it reads, the performance of the SOE depends on the capabilities and performance of its board. It is therefore imperative that when appointing directors, the shareholder should ensure that the board is properly constituted. In this regard, the board should at all times comprise of individuals with integrity and accountability, competence, relevant and complementary skills, experience and expertise. This is aimed at avoiding possible dominance by any one director or blocks of directors, and above all, ensuring commitment to the success of the SOE and the satisfaction of the shareholder. Were you aware of that? Or do you have any comment in relation to that?
No. No comment.
You put two questions at the same time, Mr. Pretorius. The one was whether he was aware of that.
Yes.
The other was whether he has comment. He has already said he has no comment. Were you aware of that at the time?
Yes, I think there was this
paragraph.
Provision, yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
We have heard this morning in relation to the appointment of board members of state-owned entities, your comments, Mr. Zuma, and I think you said it was normal or happened most of the time, you correct me if I'm wrong, that the minister would engage with the president from time to time to discuss candidates.
Yes, I said so.
Is that correct? Did this apply to heads of government departments as well?
Yeah,
That practice?
It would apply as well.
Chair, I'm about to go back to the statement of Ms. Hogan. Perhaps I should just conclude. Paragraph 40 on page 408.
Paragraph
40 on page 4, read 408.
400 and
Page 448, but the paragraph, Mr. Pretorius, you said what paragraph?
40.
I can't see 40 at page 448.
Chair, have I...
Page 408 or page 448? Let's talk about the page first.
408.
Okay, I may have misled Mr. Zuma. I thought you said 448.
Oh, 448, I'm sorry.
Yeah?
I'm following instructions. Read 408.
408, okay, that's the page.
Paragraph
Let's get there
40.
first. Let's get there first, then we can talk about the paragraph. I am at page 408 and I can see paragraph 40. Are you there, Mr. Zuma?
yeah, I'm there.
Okay, thank you.
In that paragraph, she said that she sent the memorandum to you. She describes it as a comprehensive report on or around 28 July 2009. And then she says in the last sentence, however, President Zuma did not respond. I presume she means to her. Do you know whether you did respond to her or not?
I don't remember. As I said earlier, if the report comes, in the majority of cases, for the president to understand and read the report, but not necessarily to respond at all material times, because the reports don't end with the president. The reports are the final area of looking at the report is the cabinet.
Chair, would that be a convenient time?
Yes, we'll take the lunch adjournment now and we will resume. at 2 o'clock. We adjourn.
Yabona ke baba so.